another Rock My Age podcast. I'm delighted today to have with us Kim Sharan. Kim has been in the financial services industry for over 35 years. And for at least 25 of those years, she has been had a number of C-suite roles. Kim, a little while ago, decided to step out of corporate life. And the question really, I guess, for her, and certainly for people like myself, is what next? What's the next chapter of life? How do we move from a working life to life's work? How do we find purpose and meaning in perhaps what might be the next 30 years of our life, and to utilize the skills and experience we have gained in the corporate world? And also think about what are our passions going forward, and how can we manage to bring creativity alongside those experiences and expertise that we have developed in the corporate world. So Kim, welcome.
Thank you, Erica. It's great to see you.
So you and I had a little chat a while ago, and I was just so interested in your story of you were in a corporate world for a long time, quite a long time, and then stepping out of that, did that take a while to plan, in the sense of what next for you? Was there a kind of stop and then a gap and then, what do I do now? How did you manage that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, a lot of the work that I've done is in helping clients and our advisors think about retirement and what does that really mean? And I wasn't looking to retire, because I hate that word, as you and I have discussed. I wasn't withdrawing, but what I was doing was trying to rewire into what does this next chapter look like? So I kind of dubbed it Kim 2.0. And I would say that it was kind of 2 years in the making. Right. I didn't have a particular answer, but I knew that I had so many things that I was interested in pursuing. And as I talked to a lot of people who had been through it, they said, don't just do one thing. You can do all these things. And that just felt so freeing and so exciting to me. So I started to think about, what does that next chapter feel like? What do I want it to be like? And there were some things that I really missed about being in the corporate world that I wasn't able to do just because I didn't have the time. Mm-hmm. The corporate jobs are fabulous. They give you this identity. It's like, oh, she's the XYZ. And I didn't really do it for that, but that comes along with it. Mm-hmm. You have instant community, instant family, because you spend so much time with the people that you work with. But you don't really have a lot of time to yourself. And I'm very interested in the arts. I'm interested in giving back to the community that we live in. I've been on the board of Girls Inc. for a number of years. I just rotated off in June because of term limits. But, the empowerment of women and girls is my passion. And I love the work around that. I also wanted to do some board work to be able to share my experiences with a broader boardroom, because I thought that would be another way to give back and sort of bring more purpose to what I was doing for so many years and carry that forward. So, it was an evolving concept. And it wasn't something that I just sat down and wrote in one day and said, oh, this is what my life's going to look like. And quite frankly, this whole notion of Kim 2.0 is still work in progress.
I bet.
I like to say under construction. Some days are better than others. Some weeks are fabulous, and then other weeks I'm like, oh my God, is this really what I'm doing? So it's an evolving sort of time for everyone that's going through that kind of a transition.
And it's really interesting, isn't it? Because I suppose in the old days, people retired to, I don't know, kind of spend more time with their partners or their families, and that's
more golf,
of course, and play golf and all of those things. But I think for us as women now, we have been used to independence. We've been used to the roles, as you said, that we've had in the workplace. And I don't know about you, but I feel like there's still so much energy and things that I'd like to achieve. They may be very different to in the corporate world. I would like to explore being, what does it mean to live in another country? I've never experienced that. So for me, that's a cultural piece. So I'm interested, this idea that we've probably got another 30 years. When you get to 60, you have got 30s. And there are people that, we interviewed someone recently, Dame Stephanie Shirley, who is in, I think, in her 80s and going, like a demon in business. And so, we've got a long time still to give, haven't we, as you say?
We do. And, the thing that you, Erica, and me, and a lot of my friends that I, keep in touch with, we are curious learners, and we have a lot of curiosity that drives us. So sometimes I sit down and I make a list of all the things that I'd like to learn more about or explore. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm never going to have enough time to do all of these things. Yeah. So one of the downsides of having this space is that the space can be filled with things that you never really go deep on. So my whole thing has been, I want to have 3 or 4 things at a time that I truly can dig into and feel some satisfaction or some level of accomplishment around. Because, when you're in a corporate world, everything's planned for you. Your day is planned, your meetings are planned. When you look at the calendar for a year, you've got planning season, and then you've got the working season, then you've got a strategy season. Everything is sort of laid out. Now, when you step back from that kind of structure to all of a sudden having sort of every day of your week and life open, you must plan it. Because what happened to me at the very, very beginning, you may be interested to know this, was I felt like, oh my God, I have nothing planned tomorrow. What am I going to do? Because I was so used to getting up at 5 a.m, getting dressed, leaving the house, commuting to work, coming back, not getting home till 8, 9 o'clock, traveling, et cetera, that I never really had to think about. So what am I going to do for a whole day? So that was a little bit jarring, I have to say, until I started to fill my vessel with real meaningful things. Getting on the board of TIAA. I started a consultancy and had my first client. So I could actually start to divide up my week and my days to say, this is work time, this is play time. And I think that is something, as you come off of a corporate career where you never had to think about those sorts of things. And now you've got all this open space, but how do you make good use of it is something that I've learned, and I still am learning, I have to say. It's not it's not a finished product.
And it's interesting that, isn't it? Because I found that there's this need for discipline, as you say, or structure. I mean, you're just even working from home, in lockdown. You need that structure, and yet also it's easy to almost go back into structure when you've got this opportunity to be freer.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's that tension or balance, isn't there? To make sure you spend, like you said earlier, my time, time for me, because otherwise one can fill the day up again with work, perhaps. But where I perhaps a question for you, the difference perhaps now is you can fill the day with different things. You can do my things. I know you, and I really want to hear about this. You mentioned to me that you went back to doing jewelry design. You've got your girls' ink work, which is a wonderful thing, which we'll talk about. And then you've got your still corporate work. And I know you've got some sort of non-exec type consulting roles. So you've got these almost like a portfolio of things to do, haven't you?
Right. And it's a great way to describe it. It is a portfolio. And the challenge with the portfolio is that some of those pieces take up a lot of time for certain weeks. And then other weeks, I'm totally open and free. And I could work to make work during those free periods. But what I'm working on myself is actually taking that time to think, to educate myself on something new and different. You know, the pandemic has also brought with it a lot of alone time, right? No traveling. So I have to continually think about how do I um, how do I continue to remain current?
Yeah.
And conferences, there are no conferences, but now they're online. So how do I take advantage of some great webinars and make the time to listen to them and to truly take some of those new concepts into my business, into the boardroom? And that's something that, you know, is not a natural habit for us once coming out of the corporate world, because most of our education was done for us. You know, we had competitive reviews, we had tons of people that we had access to, we could call consultants in and give us these ideas or those ideas. But now we have to do that on our own.
So true, isn't it?
Right. I mean, creating a network of people that you can tap into is not something that was, you know, anything that I really even thought about, to be honest, because before I just had it, it was just there. So I've had to be very conscious in selecting those types of things, whether it's a webinar, whether it's a connection to an old colleague, or whether it's a connection to someone new within the organization that I'm working. So, you know, I mean, it just brings with it a lot of planning. It's like, you know, you need to plan your work, but you need to work your plan. And those are two things that sometimes we just didn't have to necessarily do for ourselves because we came out of so much structure. But now with that unconstructed time, it just takes a little bit more to plan and to make sure that you're, you know, taking advantage of those things that are meaningful.
Do you think I was thinking about momentum or energy, you know, sometimes you're just talking about being alone there. And often, you know, women who've come out of the corporate world, and, you know, we can often spend a lot of time on our own. And particularly now, perhaps, you know, while we are more on our own, but finding support or inner energy. I mean, I really like the idea of your structure, because at least you can get up and you can go, right, today, you know, I'm doing these things. And you often do need to pull on that, don't you, to kickstart stuff. And you mentioned to me, and we had another lady who I interviewed, Rara Plumtree, who talked about going and learning singing. Actually, was to get through her divorce, but going back to a passion she had. And you talked about jewelry design, I think, and how, and that presumably, has that been a part of an energy for you, a personal passion?
It has. And, you know, just even getting my materials and supplies out and laying them out and creating a space within our house that where I could actually do the work was very cathartic, because I said, wow, now I'm getting back to being able to express myself in a completely different way. So I've started. It's still, this is the work in progress part. But I'm really looking forward to taking the time to learn some new techniques. There's lots of new stuff out there. There's lots of new materials, new stones, new ways of thinking about jewelry design, and really using some of the sustainability materials, sustainable materials going forward, I think is going to be really fun. So I've connected with a couple of people who have educated me about that. I mean, something that I would never have had time to do had I been working full time. So all of these things are just, they're all things that I want to do more of. But now just, really planning that little matrix of when am I going to spend deep time doing it is a challenge. Because, we've got these board meetings, and then we've got my consulting work. Sometimes that takes just more time than I've expected. We're not traveling now. So one of my clients is in China. So I have evening work where normally I would have said, oh, that's a perfect time to do jewelry design, or to, sort of take the work out and start to play around with things. So, it's really the time allocation that I probably struggle with most, because I do have so many things that I am so interested in and, want to spend time doing. But I think it's great. It's a work in progress. There's not, the great thing about this whole notion of work in progress is there's nothing that is a mistake. I can change it, I can reshape it, and I'm in charge of it. Whereas when you were working in a corporate life, you were afraid to take those risks because you had, number one, a commitment to the company, number two, a commitment to people, and you didn't want to take as many risks as you probably could have or should have, just because it was safer, right? Now, in this stage of my life, I'm in charge of it, and it's only going to be me that I have to look at if something doesn't work the way that I thought it should. So,
and even when it doesn't work, it's never really it doesn't work, is it? Because actually,
no.
what you were saying there was like, okay, I'm going to learn a bit about different types of jewelry. You're never going to make a mistake. Are you learning? Your point about curiosity, it's like, oh, okay, well, that turned out like that. How interesting. I'm going to try this next.
Exactly. This reminds me of Ken Dykewald, who we did a lot of work with when I was in the corporate world. He's the chief executive and founder of AgeWave. He said in this sort of next chapter, or the evolution of your corporate career to your new life, or what I call Kim 2.0, there are three key things that you really need to think about. Your identity, your activities, obviously this is what we've been talking about, and then relationships. And relationships, as I mentioned earlier, you sort of had instant relationships in a corporate world. Now you have to be very conscious of who is going to be in my network. How am I going to cultivate those relationships? And when am I going to find the time to do that? But the identity piece is a big one, right? I mean, everyone knows when you're in the corporate world, your identity is, oh, she is the, or he is the X. Now you move away from that and you're like, oh, well, what am I? So this whole portfolio career for me has sort of helped to define my new identity. And that is something that you have to be very conscious about, because you may feel a sense of loss of your old identity, but now you have this great new space to create your new identity. And it's a work in progress. And I think that's fine to feel that way about it. But as long as you are always forward looking about it, I think it's critical. And I just love the way he said that about these three areas. And then I would just add a fourth one to it, which is this notion of sort of remaining current and the continual learner aspect of your next chapter. Because if you don't remain current, it's kind of like, well, the portfolio career or the portfolio of things that you have formed will not be as relevant because you're not as current, right? And the world's changing so quickly. So how do you do all of those things together? in this new chapter, I think is something for people to think about. And the good thing is there's no one answer, but it's definitely, it takes time.
I love those three things. The fourth, actually, because the fourth one is the kind of the underpinner, isn't it?
It is.
Redefining and reshaping your identity. What are you good? How is the shape of your day going to be? Your activities, and then how do your relationships create? How do new relationships build? How do older relationships kind of carry on? And then how do you remain current with all of those pieces? That's fascinating. That's really great. And your point about loss, Kim, in that world, because when you transition out of something, when I was transitioning out of having been a founder of a business, yes, transitioning out of that, there was absolutely a loss. And how did you kind of accept that loss, or how did you deal with that loss? Was it very much what you said around having things to look forward to and knowing where you were going, or was there a moment for you of just sort of holding in that space of loss? I'm interested in that.
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say that at the very beginning, the first week that I was fully transitioned out of the corporate world, that first week was awful, because I really did feel like, oh my God, did I make the right decision? Maybe I should just go get another job. Maybe I should, I don't know. I just was thinking all these things. But then, I don't know if you remember this, but we created the Dream Book. Yes. In the work that we did on helping consumers find and secure a confident retirement. And I had filled out the Dream Book, and I said, okay, get out of the funk you're in, go read what you wrote. And it was fascinating, because it was a lot of the things that I'm doing, but a lot of things that I did write down, I was like, oh my God, I don't want to do that. Oh, I don't want to do that. What was I thinking? So I think that it really, you have to mourn appropriately, but you're in charge of yourself at this point. There's no one that's going to say, hey, get out of the funk you're in, except yourself. So that was sort of what I had to do. And then fortuitously, I got a couple of calls from CEOs saying, we'd like you to come help us with X or Y. And then I said, oh, do I really want to do this? Because I was thinking, I'm going to take 6 months off and just get some space and really think about this next chapter, Kim 2.0. And I very quickly did take one of the assignments, which was really a fun one. And I'm so happy I did it. And it did help me with the transition. I will say that. It helped me very quickly realize that I did have a lot to still offer. Because, when you think about, oh, she's retiring, this whole thing about withdrawing, maybe I'm not relevant anymore. This sort of reinforced to me, yep, I still can do everything that I was doing. And it was a good transition for me. And so, that's kind of how we got there.
I think that piece you just said there about, and I do feel that speaking to women who, get connected with us around this piece around, am I relevant now? Am I valued, actually? Right. And this piece around self-worth comes back, doesn't it? And the confidence. And what I love about your story is, it's a timing thing. Someone offers you something, you go for it. And actually the confidence then of going, yeah, I can do this on my own. Right. I don't need a business behind me. I don't need a great corporation behind me.
Right.
I'm reshaping it in my way. And then
right.
the way when you say a yes, even if you didn't carry on doing that, the yes takes you to something else, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Something else.
And it's very interesting that what you just said about I've worked only for very large companies, right? Fortune 100 primarily, actually all Fortune 100 companies. So you have a huge network behind you, and you have resources that, in some cases we probably took for granted. Um, but now when you accept something and you are literally on your own, that's when you have to tap into your network to say, I need help. That's not something that I was good at. And I did have to learn that the first, for this first assignment. I was like, okay, I know exactly what work needs to be done, but I can't do it alone. So that was a real learning as well. And, network, friends, colleagues, it's all so critical to make sure you stay in touch with people and really bring them in early in the process so that they can help you think through the assignment, but then also work with you on it. And that's what I did. I brought in a very good friend who had a consultancy, and we ended up working together on this project for 2 years. Wow. The first assignment, and it was great. I mean, it was a very special time.
And actually, I found the same in the sense of reaching out and working with smaller groups of people is also really, you need that camaraderie, don't you? When you've run your own business or you've worked as you have with very large teams, that you said at the beginning, I had a community. I had a family, likewise. And so, to have those connections, to be able to still, create ideas together, to share ideas, to bang ideas around is so important still, isn't it? Because otherwise it can be quite a lonely place. I was going to say lonely, but maybe just being alone. It's a very different energy, isn't it, to do it on your own?
Totally is. And that's one of the things that Ken Dykewald actually talks about in his book about what retirees want. It's a fairly new book. And it's all about, this connectedness. And so how do you create that? How do you think about who is in your little circle? Everybody that you may have thought was in your circle may be at a different point in their lives where it doesn't feel right or it doesn't fit. Not that you don't love them and that you don't want them to be, a part of your network, but it may not be the person that you thought it was, and it may not be the person that you would reach out to every day. Right? So you've got to really rethink that connectedness and who is going to be in that circle. One of the biggest issues, and I'm sure you've read a lot about this, as I have, isolation in sort of, your next chapter. I don't want to call it retirement, but in the next chapter is something that is really problematic. I have talked to, and I do coach a couple of people going through this just to share, what I did. And not that mine's perfect. As I said, mine's still sort of in progress and under construction. But one of the things that people tell me is they feel lonely and they feel isolated. And that's something that is very dangerous, because we know that isolation is a killer, like literally a killer. And especially for older people, I see it with my dad, is he feels isolated, particularly with the pandemic, not being able to get out and talk to people and, do the things that he was able to do. But for us, for people in their 60s, 70s, isolation is not a good thing. So you've really got to think about that network and how you are going to remain connected in a healthy way to the world.
Isolation can be very lowering, can't it? Really lowering. And then, of course, then the immune system gets lowered, and then it's health. So you're absolutely right, Kim. It's such an important aspect, and to reach out to other people when you know that other people are actually, you know, it's something I suppose as you're talking, being aware of when other women are transitioning out.
Yes.
And how can we, as you said, coaching other women that you're talking to, how can we support other women that are transitioning out to make sure that they don't feel isolated?
Yeah, I think it's so important, and it's a great way to give back and to sort of uplift someone else and to help them in thinking it through. I think what you're doing is just so amazing. I've watched many of the videos that you've done, and I just love the work that you're doing. It's creative, and I wouldn't expect anything else from you, Erica. But,
well, it is work in progress.
Yeah, but, you know, it's so great that people can listen to stories. And, you know, I'm a big storyteller myself. I love the fact that people can listen to others' stories and learn from them, and maybe take one or two things. It doesn't need to be the whole story, right? You need to create your own. But how can it help someone move from where they are to a better place?
Brilliant, Kim. Thank you so much. And actually, on that note, the story, I remember reading when someone said, at the end of the day, all we really have is our story.
That's right. It's our story to write.
Brilliant. I thank you so much for sharing your story so far. So far, 2.0, Kim 2.0. I'm really excited about seeing and hearing the rest of the journey.
Thank you, Erica.
Thank
it's
you
so
so
great
much.
to connect.
Thank you. Hope you enjoyed the
Bye.
conversation today. And if you'd like to listen to more conversations with inspiring women, do look at our website, rockmyage.com, or register to have them delivered direct to your inbox. Until next time.